In the world of royal protocol, where every gesture carries weight and every glance holds meaning, there exists a silent language, known only to those sworn to protect. On a seemingly ordinary Tuesday afternoon in March 2019, during what appeared to be a routine charity gala at the Royal Opera House, a single subtle movement would demonstrate the extraordinary bond between a future king and those who guard his life. Sergeant Major James Harrison had served in the Royal Protection Unit for 12 years. He had witnessed countless public appearances, navigated through thousands of crowd interactions, and learned to read the invisible threads of communication that weave through royal events. But nothing in his extensive training had prepared him for the moment when a simple adjustment of a cufflink would trigger a chain of events that would later be studied in security academies worldwide. The story you're about to read is not just about royal protocol or security measures. It is about human intuition, the power of silent communication, and how years of trust between individuals can create an understanding so profound that words become unnecessary. It reveals the hidden world that exists parallel to the public face of royalty, where split-second decisions can mean the difference between safety and catastrophe. This is the true account of how a trained eye caught what others missed, how a subtle signal crossed a crowded room faster than any spoken word, and how the relationship between protector and protected transcends the boundaries of duty to become something far more extraordinary. What happened that evening would forever change how the Royal Protection Unit approaches their sacred responsibility, and it would cement a bond that goes beyond the call of duty into the realm of brotherhood. The evening air of London carried the familiar sounds of the city as Sergeant Major James Harrison adjusted his earpiece for the third time that hour. The Royal Opera House stood magnificently before him, its grand columns illuminated against the darkening sky. Tonight was different from the usual royal engagements he had overseen. Tonight, Prince William would be attending the annual charity gala for the Prince's Trust, an event that drew not only the cream of British society, but also international guests whose backgrounds required extra scrutiny. Harrison had been with the Royal Protection Unit for 12 years, long enough to develop what his colleagues called a sixth sense for trouble. His weathered hands, marked by years of military service before joining the royal detail, moved with practiced efficiency as he conducted his final security sweep. The Opera House had been checked and rechecked, every entrance monitored, every guest list scrutinized 3 times over. Yet something in the air felt different tonight, though he couldn't quite place what it was. The guest list read like a who's who of international philanthropy. Business tycoons from New York, tech entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley, oil magnates from the Middle East, and European aristocracy would all gather under one ornate ceiling. Each name had been vetted, each background checked, but Harrison knew that in his line of work, it was often the unexpected that proved most dangerous. Prince William's motorcade arrived precisely at 7:30, as scheduled. Harrison watched from his position near the grand entrance as the future king emerged from the armored Bentley, his evening wear immaculate, his demeanor relaxed and confident. The prince had always been professional in their interactions, treating the protection detail with respect and understanding the delicate balance between security and the appearance of normalcy that royal life demanded. As William made his way up the red-carpeted steps, pausing to acknowledge the waiting photographers and well-wishers, Harrison's trained eyes swept the crowd. Years of experience had taught him to watch not just for obvious threats, but for the subtle indicators that something was amiss. A person standing too rigidly, someone avoiding eye contact, a guest who seemed overly interested in the security arrangements rather than the event itself. Inside the Opera House, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The venue had been transformed for the evening, with elaborate floral arrangements adorning every available surface and crystal chandeliers casting warm light over the assembled guests. The cocktail reception was in full swing, the sound of conversation and laughter mixing with the soft classical music performed by a string quartet positioned near the grand staircase. Harrison positioned himself strategically where he could maintain visual contact with Prince William while remaining unobtrusive. This was an art form he had perfected over the years, the ability to blend into the background while never relaxing his vigilance. His eyes continuously scanned the room, noting the positions of his team members, identifying exit routes, and cataloging the faces of guests as they moved through the reception area. The prince moved through the crowd with natural ease, engaging in conversations about the charity work that was close to his heart. Harrison watched as William discussed housing initiatives with a group of property developers, his genuine passion for the cause evident in his animated gestures and focused attention. This was William at his best, using his position to further causes he believed in, connecting with people in a way that seemed effortless but Harrison knew required considerable skill and preparation. As the evening progressed, Harrison noticed several guests who warranted closer attention. There was a man in an expensive suit who seemed more interested in studying the room's layout than in socializing. a woman near the champagne station who had been nursing the same glass for over an hour while positioning herself with clear sightlines to the prince. An elderly gentleman who had declined to provide identification to the door staff and had been admitted only after intervention from a prominent board member. Harrison's earpiece crackled softly with updates from other team members positioned throughout the venue. Everything was proceeding according to plan, yet that nagging feeling in the back of his mind persisted. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts, even when logic suggested everything was fine. The cocktail reception was scheduled to last until 8:15, after which guests would move to the main auditorium for dinner and the evening's entertainment. It was during these transition periods that Harrison's team was most alert, as the movement of large groups of people created opportunities for those with malicious intent. Prince William had just finished speaking with a group of young entrepreneurs when Harrison noticed a subtle shift in the prince's demeanor. It was nothing dramatic, nothing that would be apparent to the casual observer. William continued to smile and engage with those around him, but Harrison caught a slight tension in his shoulders, a barely perceptible change in his posture that spoke of heightened alertness. Harrison had worked with enough members of the royal family to recognize their individual tells, the small signs that indicated when they sensed something amiss. Each royal had their own way of communicating with their protection detail without alerting those around them. Some used predetermined verbal codes woven into seemingly innocent conversation. Others relied on specific physical positions or movements. Prince William had always been subtle in his communications with the security team. His military background and understanding of operational security made him an ideal partner in maintaining both safety and the appearance of normalcy. Tonight, Harrison sensed that the prince was picking up on the same undercurrent of tension that had been bothering him all evening. The moment that would define the rest of the evening began at exactly 8:07. Harrison was positioned near a pillar that afforded him a clear view of both Prince William and the main entrance, when he noticed a man he hadn't seen before entering the reception area. The newcomer was well-dressed and carried himself with confidence, but there was something about his movements that immediately caught Harrison's attention. The man's eyes swept the room in a pattern that Harrison recognized from his own training, the systematic scan of someone assessing threats and opportunities, rather than simply taking in the social scene. More concerning was the way the man's gaze lingered on Prince William, not with the curiosity of a fellow guest or the admiration of someone meeting royalty for the first time, but with the focused intensity of someone with a specific agenda. Harrison activated his throat mic with a subtle movement, preparing to alert his team to the potential concern when something extraordinary happened. Prince William, engaged in conversation with a group of charity officials, casually reached up and adjusted his left cufflink. To anyone watching, it appeared to be nothing more than a minor grooming adjustment, the kind of unconscious gesture people make hundreds of times each day. But Harrison knew better. During their security briefings, they had established a series of discrete signals that could be used if verbal communication was impossible or inadvisable. The left cufflink adjustment was the signal for heightened concern about a specific individual, usually accompanied by subtle directional cues to indicate who had drawn the prince's attention. Following the direction of William's gaze moments after the cufflink signal, Harrison's eyes locked onto the same man who had caught his own attention. The confirmation that both he and the prince had independently identified the same person as a potential threat sent a chill down his spine. In 12 years of protection duty, he had never experienced such perfect synchronization of threat assessment between protectee and protector. The man in question had moved closer to the prince's group, positioning himself near a service entrance that Harrison's team had identified as a potential vulnerability during their pre-event planning. The man's behavior continued to set off alarm bells, his movements too calculated, his positioning too strategic for someone simply attending a charity gala. Harrison's mind raced through the protocols they had established for this exact scenario. The primary objective was always to ensure the prince's safety, without creating a scene that could panic other guests or provide fodder for negative media coverage. The royal family's public engagements required a delicate balance between security and accessibility, and any overreaction could have long-lasting consequences for future events. Through his earpiece, Harrison heard the steady stream of status reports from his team members. None of them had yet identified the potential threat, which meant the responsibility for assessment and response fell squarely on his shoulders. The weight of that responsibility was something he had carried for years, but tonight it felt heavier than usual. Prince William continued his conversation, giving no outward sign of concern, but Harrison noticed the subtle ways in which he was managing his position relative to the potential threat. The prince had angled his body slightly, creating better sightlines for Harrison and his team while maintaining the appearance of casual engagement with his conversation partners. The suspicious guest made another movement that confirmed Harrison's worst fears. The man's hand moved to his jacket pocket, not in the obvious way that would immediately alert security, but with the practiced efficiency of someone accessing something they had placed there deliberately. Harrison's training kicked into high gear as he prepared for multiple scenarios, each one requiring split-second decision-making that could mean the difference between a successful evening and a catastrophic incident. As the seconds ticked by, Harrison found himself in the unique position of watching two parallel events unfold. On the surface, a charity gala continued with all the elegance and refinement expected of such an occasion. Prince William charmed guests, donors felt valued for their contributions, and the evening proceeded according to the carefully planned schedule. Underneath that veneer of normalcy, however, a dangerous game was playing out. A potential threat had been identified, signals had been exchanged, and now the most crucial phase would begin. Harrison's years of training and experience would be put to the ultimate test, and the bond of trust between him and Prince William would prove whether their silent communication system could prevent what was beginning to look like a very real threat to the future King of England. The man's next move would determine everything, and Harrison prepared himself for whatever was to come, knowing that in the world of royal protection, there are no second chances and no room for error. The tension in the opera house had become almost palpable to Harrison, though he doubted anyone else in the room sensed it. His eyes remained fixed on the suspicious man while his peripheral vision tracked Prince William's movements. The delicate dance of royal protection was entering its most critical phase, where every decision would ripple outward with consequences that could extend far beyond this single evening. The man who had drawn their mutual attention was now positioned approximately 15 feet from Prince William, close enough to pose a significant threat but not so close as to trigger the automatic response protocols that would result in immediate intervention. Harrison's mind ran through the tactical scenarios he had rehearsed countless times, each one requiring split-second timing and flawless execution. Through his earpiece, Harrison received an update from Agent Matthews, positioned near the main entrance. A late arrival had just been processed through security, a guest whose invitation had been verified but whose presence had not been expected. The timing struck Harrison as potentially significant, though he couldn't yet determine if there was any connection to the man he was currently monitoring. Prince William had masterfully maneuvered his conversation group closer to one of the predetermined safe positions they had established during the pre-event briefing. Without appearing to do so deliberately, he had guided his companions toward a location that offered multiple exit routes and better fields of vision for his protection detail. The prince's subtle understanding of security protocols never ceased to impress Harrison, demonstrating a level of tactical awareness that came from years of living under constant protection. The suspicious man's behavior became increasingly concerning as he began what appeared to be a systematic approach toward the prince's position. His movements were casual enough to avoid drawing attention from other guests, but Harrison could see the underlying pattern. This was not random mingling but a calculated advance, the kind of behavior that had triggered every alarm bell in his extensive experience. Harrison activated his throat mic with the slightest of movements, using the predetermined code that would alert his team to elevated threat status without causing panic among the guests. The response was immediate and professional, as agents throughout the venue began subtle repositioning that would create overlapping fields of coverage around Prince William while maintaining the appearance of normal social circulation. The next few minutes unfolded like a carefully choreographed ballet, though one where a single misstep could have catastrophic consequences. Agent Chen, positioned near the Champagne station, began a casual drift that would place her between the potential threat and one of the service exits. Agent Rodriguez, who had been monitoring the balcony level, descended to the main floor under the pretense of checking with event organizers about the evening's schedule. Meanwhile, Prince William continued to demonstrate why he was considered one of the most naturally gifted members of the royal family when it came to public engagements. His conversation with the charity officials had expanded to include several major donors, creating a larger group that provided both cover and additional witnesses to deter any potential action. The prince's ability to maintain genuine engagement with his conversation partners while simultaneously managing a potential security situation was remarkable to witness. The man of concern had paused in his approach, perhaps sensing the subtle changes in the room's dynamics that had escaped the notice of other guests but were apparent to someone with training in surveillance detection. Harrison watched as the man's eyes swept the area, cataloging the positions of what he likely suspected were plainclothes security personnel. This level of operational awareness only heightened Harrison's concerns about the man's true intentions. At 8:12, 3 minutes before the scheduled transition to dinner, the situation took an unexpected turn. The late arrival that Agent Matthews had reported approached the group surrounding Prince William, and Harrison immediately recognized him as Lord Pemberton, a prominent businessman whose charitable contributions had earned him regular invitations to royal events. The timing of his arrival and his immediate approach to the prince could be coincidence, but Harrison's experience had taught him to view coincidences with deep suspicion. What happened next would later be analyzed in security briefings for months to come. Lord Pemberton's approach created a natural shift in the conversation group's formation, opening a clear path between the suspicious man and Prince William. The potential threat immediately moved to take advantage of this opportunity, his pace quickening slightly in a way that suggested he recognized the significance of the moment. Harrison faced a critical decision point. He could intervene immediately, using physical presence to disrupt whatever action the man might be planning, but doing so without clear evidence of hostile intent could create a diplomatic incident and generate negative publicity that would affect future royal engagements. Alternatively, he could continue monitoring and hope that his assessment was wrong, but this approach carried the unacceptable risk of allowing a potential attack to unfold. The decision was made for him when Prince William executed what Harrison would later describe as the most brilliant piece of tactical maneuvering he had ever witnessed in a civilian setting. Under the guise of greeting Lord Pemberton with the enthusiastic warmth appropriate for a major contributor to his charitable causes, the prince stepped forward and slightly to his left, positioning himself behind two other guests while simultaneously moving away from the approaching potential threat. The movement appeared completely natural to casual observers, the kind of social repositioning that occurs countless times at any large gathering. However, Harrison immediately recognized it as a defensive maneuver that created both distance and cover while placing the suspicious man in clear view of multiple security personnel. The prince's military training and years of experience with protection protocols had resulted in a textbook example of threat mitigation disguised as normal social interaction. The suspicious man's reaction confirmed Harrison's worst fears. Instead of adjusting his approach to accommodate the prince's new position, the man showed visible frustration, his jaw tightening and his posture becoming more rigid. More concerning still, his hand returned to his jacket pocket, this time with more urgency than before. Harrison's training took over completely. Moving with the fluid efficiency that had been drilled into him through years of practice, he began his approach toward the potential threat. His movement was casual enough to avoid alarming other guests, but purposeful enough to close the distance quickly if intervention became necessary. The next 30 seconds would be forever etched in Harrison's memory. The suspicious man's hand emerged from his jacket pocket, and Harrison's muscles tensed for immediate action. However, instead of a weapon or other threatening object, the man withdrew what appeared to be a small recording device, the kind used by journalists to capture interviews or ambient sound. The realization hit Harrison like a physical blow. The man they had been tracking as a potential assassin was likely an undercover journalist, attempting to record private conversations at a royal event. While this was certainly inappropriate and potentially illegal depending on the specific circumstances, it was a far different threat than what they had been preparing to counter. The relief Harrison felt was tempered by the recognition that their threat assessment protocols had worked exactly as designed. The man's behavior had indeed been suspicious, his positioning strategic, and his concealment of equipment concerning. The fact that the equipment turned out to be recording gear rather than a weapon didn't negate the appropriateness of their response. Prince William's handling of the situation had been exemplary throughout. His initial signal had alerted the security team to a legitimate concern. His subsequent positioning had created optimal conditions for threat mitigation, and his continued engagement with other guests had prevented panic while maintaining the event's atmosphere. Harrison made the decision to continue monitoring the journalist rather than confronting him immediately. The recording equipment posed no physical threat to Prince William, and removing the man from the event could create exactly the kind of scene that would dominate headlines and overshadow the charitable purpose of the gathering. Instead, Harrison positioned himself where he could prevent the journalist from getting close enough to record clear audio while allowing the evening to proceed normally. The transition to dinner began as scheduled, with guests moving from the reception area toward the main dining room. Harrison coordinated with his team to ensure the journalist was subtly separated from Prince William during the movement, using the natural flow of crowd dynamics to create distance without obvious intervention. As they moved through the Opera House's elegant corridors, Harrison reflected on the evening's events so far. The silent communication between himself and Prince William had functioned flawlessly, identifying a legitimate security concern and responding appropriately. While the threat had proven less severe than initially feared, the system had worked exactly as designed. The main dining room was a masterpiece of event planning, with round tables arranged to facilitate conversation while providing clear sightlines for security personnel. Prince William was seated at the head table, positioned where he could engage with the evening's most important supporters while remaining in optimal view of his protection detail. Harrison took his assigned position, noting with satisfaction that the journalist had been seated at a table far enough away to prevent effective recording while close enough to avoid any appearance of deliberate exclusion. The delicate balance between security and hospitality had been maintained, though Harrison knew the evening was far from over. The first course was served with the efficiency expected at such high-profile events, and Prince William began his remarks about the Prince's Trust's recent achievements and future goals. His speech was passionate and personal, reflecting genuine commitment to the causes he championed rather than the ceremonial obligations that filled much of his public schedule. As Harrison listened to the Prince's words about providing opportunities for disadvantaged young people, he was reminded of why this work was so important. The protection they provided allowed these charitable efforts to continue, creating real change in the lives of people who needed it most. The responsibility felt heavier in moments like these, when the broader purpose of their work became crystal clear. The evening was entering what Harrison's experience suggested would be its most relaxed phase, as guests settled into dinner conversation and the formal program began. However, his years of experience had also taught him that relaxation was a luxury he could never afford, as threats could emerge at any moment and from any direction. The journalist's presence continued to be monitored, though his behavior had become less concerning as the evening progressed. Perhaps the man had recognized that his surveillance had been detected, or maybe he had obtained whatever information he had come seeking during the cocktail reception. Either way, Harrison maintained his vigilance while allowing himself a small measure of satisfaction in how the situation had been handled. As the main course was served, and Prince William engaged in animated conversation with the guests at his table, Harrison found himself thinking about the unique nature of his job. Few professions required such constant alertness combined with absolute discretion, the ability to blend into elegant social settings while remaining prepared for violence at any moment. The evening was far from over, and Harrison knew that their earlier success in managing one potential threat did not guarantee the remainder of the event would proceed without incident. If anything, the effectiveness of their communication and response systems had reinforced his confidence in their ability to handle whatever challenges the rest of the evening might present. The real test of their partnership would come in the hours ahead, as the event moved through its remaining phases and new variables were introduced. Harrison settled in for what he expected to be a long night, his eyes constantly scanning, his mind processing every detail, and his communication with Prince William remaining as sharp and efficient as it had proven to be when the evening's first challenge had emerged. The dinner service proceeded with clockwork precision, though Harrison's attention remained divided between the elegant social atmosphere and the constant assessment of potential security concerns. The journalist who had occupied so much of their focus during the cocktail reception had settled into apparent compliance with social norms, though Harrison maintained periodic visual contact to ensure the situation remained stable. Prince William's dinner conversation had evolved into an animated discussion about educational opportunities in underserved communities, a topic that clearly energized him and drew passionate responses from the philanthropists and business leaders seated at his table. Harrison had observed enough of these events to recognize when the prince was genuinely engaged, versus when he was performing the social obligations that came with his position. Tonight's discussion clearly fell into the former category. At 9:15, as the main course plates were being cleared and preparation for the evening's entertainment began, Harrison noticed a new dynamic emerging in the room. A group of guests at a table near the far wall had begun what appeared to be an intense conversation, their body language suggesting disagreement or conflict, rather than the collegial atmosphere that had characterized most of the evening's interactions. The group included several individuals Harrison recognized from the pre-event briefing as representatives of competing charitable organizations, some of whom had philosophical differences about fundraising approaches and resource allocation. While such disagreements were common in the non-profit world, the timing and visible tension of their discussion warranted monitoring in case it escalated beyond polite disagreement. Harrison activated his throat mic to alert Agent Chen, positioned with the best viewing angle of the potentially contentious table. Her confirmation came through his earpiece moments later, indicating that she had also noticed the developing situation and was maintaining close observation. The coordination between team members felt seamless, the result of years of training and experience working together in high-pressure environments. Prince William had finished his main course and was preparing to move to the podium for the evening's keynote address when Harrison caught a subtle change in his demeanor. The prince's eyes had moved past his dinner companions to focus on something across the room, and Harrison immediately began scanning to identify what had captured the prince's attention. The source became apparent when Harrison's gaze followed the prince's sightline to the table where the heated discussion was taking place. One of the participants, a man Harrison recognized as the director of a housing charity that had recently been criticized in the media for financial irregularities, had stood and appeared to be preparing to leave his table mid-meal. This behavior immediately triggered several concerns for Harrison. Departing guests during formal dinner events required coordination with security to ensure proper escort procedures, particularly when the guest in question might have reasons for wanting to avoid further scrutiny. More concerning was the possibility that the man's departure could be a precursor to some form of disruption designed to embarrass the prince or the charitable organizations he supported. The prince's response demonstrated once again his remarkable situational awareness and tactical thinking. Instead of immediately rising to deliver his scheduled remarks, William engaged the event organizer seated beside him in what appeared to be a question about the evening's program. The conversation bought valuable time for Harrison's team to assess and respond to the developing situation. Harrison moved with practiced efficiency toward the table where the dispute was occurring, his approach casual enough to avoid drawing attention while positioned to intervene if the situation escalated. As he drew closer, fragments of conversation confirmed his suspicions about the nature of the disagreement. Once, the departing guest was defending his organization's financial practices against accusations of misappropriation, his voice becoming increasingly agitated as other charitable leaders questioned his methods. The man's decision to leave appeared motivated by anger and embarrassment rather than any malicious intent toward Prince William. But Harrison had learned never to make assumptions about motivation when safety was at stake. Agent Chen's voice came through his earpiece, reporting that she had positioned herself near the main exit to coordinate with venue security if an escort became necessary. The preparation was routine but essential, ensuring that any disruption would be managed efficiently and with minimal impact on the evening's primary purpose. The situation took an unexpected turn when the departing guest, instead of heading toward the exit, began moving in the direction of the head table where Prince William was seated. Harrison's alertness immediately elevated to maximum, as this change in direction suggested either confusion about the room's layout or more concerning possibilities related to the man's intentions. Prince William's awareness of the developing situation became apparent through another subtle signal, this time the adjustment of his water glass position from right to left, a predetermined indicator that he had noted a potential approach and was prepared for whatever response might be necessary. The communication between them remained invisible to other guests while providing essential coordination for the security team. Harrison accelerated his own movement, positioning himself to intercept the approaching guest if intervention became necessary. The delicate balance between allowing normal social interaction and preventing potential disruption required split-second judgment calls that had been honed through years of experience in similar situations. The man's approach to the head table attracted the attention of other guests, creating exactly the kind of visible disturbance that royal events were designed to avoid. Harrison could see media representatives in the room beginning to take notice, their cameras and recording equipment turning toward the developing scene with the instinctual recognition that something newsworthy might be unfolding. When the agitated guest reached the perimeter of the head table area, Harrison was positioned perfectly to intercept if necessary while remaining unobtrusive enough to allow the situation to resolve naturally. If the man's intentions were benign, the next few moments would require careful calibration to prevent both physical harm and public relations damage. Prince William's response exceeded even Harrison's high expectations for royal diplomacy under pressure. Rising from his seat with a warm smile, the prince greeted the approaching guest by name and expressed pleasure at seeing him at the event. The welcoming gesture immediately diffused much of the tension while positioning William in a better tactical position should defensive measures become necessary. The conversation that followed demonstrated masterful conflict resolution, as Prince William skillfully redirected the man's agitation into discussion about the positive work his organization had accomplished despite recent challenges. The prince's ability to find common ground and emphasize shared values gradually transformed what could have been a confrontational encounter into a display of mutual respect and understanding. Harrison maintained his position throughout the exchange, ready to intervene if the conversation took a negative turn, but increasingly confident that Prince William's diplomatic skills would resolve the situation peacefully. The other guests at the head table contributed to the positive atmosphere by welcoming the visitor and expressing interest in his organization's work. After approximately 5 minutes of conversation, the agitated guest's demeanor had completely transformed. The anger and embarrassment that had motivated his departure from his original table had been replaced by obvious gratitude for Prince William's gracious reception and supportive words. The man returned to his seat with renewed dignity and a clear sense of having been heard and validated. The incident's resolution marked a turning point in the evening's energy. The successful navigation of a potentially disruptive situation had demonstrated both the prince's personal skills and the effectiveness of his security team's coordination. More importantly, it had reinforced the charitable mission that had brought everyone together, emphasizing shared commitment to helping those in need rather than focusing on organizational politics or personal conflicts. Prince William's keynote address, delivered shortly after the incident's resolution, was particularly powerful in its emphasis on unity and collaboration within the charitable sector. His remarks, subtly but clearly, addressed the tensions that had emerged during dinner, encouraging the assembled guests to focus on their common purposes rather than their differences. As the prince spoke about the transformative power of charitable work and the importance of supporting organizations that served vulnerable populations, Harrison found himself reflecting on the evening's events. The combination of potential security threats, interpersonal conflicts, and media attention could have derailed the event's charitable mission, but careful management and skilled diplomacy had transformed challenges into opportunities for demonstration of values. The applause that followed Prince William's address was notably enthusiastic, reflecting genuine appreciation not only for his words, but for the grace with which he had handled the earlier difficult moment. The event's atmosphere had been fully restored, with guests returning their focus to the charitable causes that had originally motivated their attendance. During the dessert course, Harrison noted with satisfaction that the various tensions that had characterized earlier portions of the evening had largely dissipated. The journalist who had been their primary security concern during the cocktail reception was engaged in seemingly normal conversation with his tablemates. The charitable leaders who had disagreed so heatedly during the main course were now collaborating on ideas for joint fundraising initiatives. The transformation reminded Harrison why he found this work so rewarding despite its challenges. The protection they provided enabled events like this one to fulfill their true purpose, creating environments where important work could be accomplished and meaningful relationships could be built. The security measures remained invisible to most guests, but their effectiveness allowed the charitable mission to take center stage. As the evening moved towards its conclusion, Harrison began coordinating with his team for the departure procedures that would conclude their responsibilities for the night. The protocols for royal departures were complex, requiring coordination with venue security, local police, and transportation resources to ensure safe and efficient movement through potentially crowded public areas. Prince William's interaction with guests during the dessert course demonstrated his commitment to maximizing the value of every public appearance. Rather than simply fulfilling ceremonial obligations, he used these opportunities to learn about new charitable initiatives, offer encouragement to organizations facing challenges, and identify opportunities for future collaboration. The evening's entertainment, featuring performances by young artists supported by the Prince's Trust, provided a perfect conclusion to the charitable focus of the event. Harrison watched as Prince William's genuine appreciation for the performances reinforced the personal connection he maintained with the organization's mission and beneficiaries. As the final performance concluded and guests began preparing for departure, Harrison reflected on the unique nature of the evening's challenges and successes. The silent communication system he had developed with Prince William had proven its effectiveness multiple times, enabling rapid identification and response to potential threats while maintaining the social atmosphere essential for successful charitable fundraising. The partnership between protector and protected had evolved far beyond simple security protocols to become a collaborative relationship built on mutual trust, respect, and shared commitment to enabling important work to continue, despite the various risks and challenges that came with public life. The evening had tested every aspect of that partnership, and Harrison felt confident that they had passed each test with distinction. The transition to departure procedures began as scheduled, with guests beginning to make their farewells and security personnel preparing for the complex logistics of safely transporting Prince William back to his residence. Harrison's responsibilities for the evening were far from over, but the most challenging phase had been successfully completed. The departure procedures began with a systematic precision that characterized all aspects of royal protection. Though Harrison knew from experience that these final phases of public events often presented unique challenges, guests were beginning to collect their belongings and make their farewells, creating the fluid crowd dynamics that required constant vigilance from the security team. Prince William had moved into the post-event networking phase, using these final minutes to conduct private conversations with key supporters and address specific concerns that had emerged during the evening. Harrison positioned himself to maintain visual contact while allowing sufficient privacy for these important discussions, many of which would influence future charitable initiatives and fundraising efforts. At 10:45, As the formal portion of the evening concluded and guests began their departure process, Harrison received an unexpected communication through his earpiece. Agent Rodriguez, monitoring the building's perimeter, reported unusual activity in the alley behind the Opera House. A vehicle had been parked there for over an hour without any apparent connection to the event, its occupants remaining inside despite the cold London evening. The report immediately elevated Harrison's alertness levels, as unexplained surveillance was one of the key indicators they monitored for potential security threats. The timing was particularly concerning, coinciding with the period when Prince William's departure route and timing might become apparent to anyone conducting organized surveillance of the event. Harrison's mind quickly processed the tactical implications. The standard departure route for royal events from the Opera House utilized the main entrance, where official vehicles would be waiting under the protection of uniformed police officers and additional security personnel. However, the presence of an unknown vehicle in a position to observe rear exits suggested the possibility of coordinated surveillance designed to identify alternative routes or timing patterns. Through his throat mic, Harrison requested additional details about the suspicious vehicle, while simultaneously beginning the discreet repositioning that would provide enhanced security during the departure phase. The response came quickly, confirming that the vehicle contained at least 2 occupants and had been positioned to observe both the main building and service areas used by staff and suppliers. Prince William's conversation with the evening's lead organizers was reaching its natural conclusion when Harrison made the decision to implement enhanced departure protocols. Using the predetermined signal of adjusting his collar, he indicated to the prince that security concerns required modification of standard procedures. The prince's barely perceptible nod confirmed he had received and understood the communication. The beauty of their established communication system became apparent as Prince William seamlessly extended his conversation with the event organizers, buying Harrison's team additional time to assess the external situation while maintaining the appearance of normal social interaction. The prince's questions about future events and collaborative opportunities appeared entirely natural while serving the essential security function of delaying departure until the threat could be properly evaluated. Agent Chen's voice came through Harrison's earpiece with an update that heightened his concerns. Street-level surveillance had identified a second vehicle positioned near the front entrance, its occupants also maintaining extended observation of the Opera House. The coordination between the 2 vehicles suggested a level of organization that went beyond casual interest or opportunistic crime, pointing toward more sophisticated surveillance operations. Harrison's experience with coordinated surveillance immediately triggered protocols designed for situations involving potential kidnapping attempts or assassination plots. While such extreme scenarios were rare, the stakes involved in protecting a future king required preparation for even low-probability threats that could have catastrophic consequences. The decision to implement alternative departure procedures was made quickly, but required careful coordination with multiple agencies and resources. Harrison's communication with the Metropolitan Police Command Center resulted in immediate deployment of additional units to establish expanded perimeters around the Opera House, while specialized surveillance teams worked to identify the occupants of the suspicious vehicles. Prince William's awareness of the developing situation was evident in the subtle ways he began managing his position within the building. Without appearing to do so deliberately, he moved his farewell conversations away from windows and toward interior locations that offered better protection and multiple exit options. His military training and years of experience with protection protocols had prepared him well for situations requiring tactical thinking disguised as normal social behavior. The investigation of the suspicious vehicles proceeded with impressive efficiency. Within 15 minutes, undercover officers had approached both locations using various pretexts to gather visual intelligence on the occupants. The results were both reassuring and puzzling, as neither vehicle contained individuals who matched known threat profiles or appeared to be carrying surveillance equipment beyond standard mobile phones. However, Harrison's training had taught him to be skeptical of apparently innocent explanations when multiple indicators suggested coordinated activity. The timing of the vehicle's arrival, their positioning relative to key exits, and their occupants' sustained attention to the Opera House created a pattern that warranted continued caution regardless of their apparent lack of obvious threatening behavior. The alternative departure strategy that Harrison's team implemented involved using a service exit that connected to an underground parking facility typically reserved for Opera House staff and equipment. This route would allow Prince William's motorcade to depart without exposure to the main street areas where the suspicious vehicles were positioned, while additional security resources created diversion and confusion about the actual departure timing. Prince William's cooperation with the modified security arrangements was exemplary, demonstrating the trust and professionalism that had developed between him and his protection detail over years of working together. When Harrison approached with the discreet signal that departure procedures were being altered, the prince immediately shifted his conversation patterns to accommodate the new timeline, while showing no external signs of concern that might alert observers. The coordination required for implementing alternative departure procedures involved numerous moving parts that had to function flawlessly to ensure both safety and discretion. The Opera House facilities management team provided access codes and route guidance for areas not typically used by guests, while transportation resources were rerouted to new pickup locations that had been secured and cleared by advanced security personnel. As these preparations proceeded, Harrison maintained his position near Prince William, while coordinating the complex logistics through his communication system. The ability to manage multiple information streams while maintaining situational awareness of immediate surroundings was one of the most demanding aspects of protection work, requiring mental agility that had been developed through years of training and experience. At 11:20, the modified departure sequence began with Prince William making his final farewells to the evening's key participants. His expressions of gratitude and commitments to future collaboration appeared entirely genuine, while serving the additional purpose of providing cover for the security team's movements throughout the building. The prince's ability to maintain authentic engagement while managing tactical consideration with its sophistication, the movement through the Opera House's interior spaces toward the alternative exit point required navigation through areas not designed for formal processions. Harrison and his team had conducted rapid reconnaissance of the route, identifying potential choke points and ensuring that adequate lighting and communication coverage existed along the entire path. Prince William's progress through these utilitarian spaces provided an interesting contrast to the elegant public areas where the evening's formal events had taken place. The backstage areas revealed the complex infrastructure required to support world-class performances, with equipment storage, dressing areas, and technical facilities creating a maze-like environment that required careful navigation. The security implications of moving through unfamiliar spaces were significant, as the team's pre-event planning had focused primarily on public areas and standard routes. Harrison's constant communication with team members positioned ahead of their movement ensured that each area was cleared and secured before the prince's arrival, maintaining the security envelope that was essential for safe passage. The service exit led to an underground parking facility that had been transformed into a secure departure zone through the positioning of additional security personnel and vehicles. The Metropolitan Police had established a protective perimeter that extended beyond the immediate facility to ensure no surveillance could compromise the alternative route or timing. Prince William's entrance into the armored vehicle proceeded with practiced efficiency, though Harrison noted the prince's brief smile of appreciation for the team's quick adaptation to changing circumstances. The acknowledgement was brief but meaningful, reflecting the mutual respect that had developed through years of professional partnership in challenging situations. The motorcade's departure through the underground facility and onto London streets proceeded without incident, following routes that had been selected to avoid the areas where suspicious vehicles had been positioned.
Harrison monitored radio communications for updates on the investigation of those vehicles, hoping to understand whether their concerns had been justified or if they had responded to a false alarm.
The answer came as they reached the halfway point of their journey back to Prince William's residence. The suspicious vehicles had departed their positions shortly after the official departure time had passed without the expected motorcade appearance, suggesting that their occupants had indeed been conducting surveillance, but had concluded their activities when the expected target failed to materialize. Further investigation revealed that the vehicles belonged to freelance photographers, hoping to capture images of Prince William's departure for sale to media outlets. While their behavior had appeared suspicious from a security perspective, their intentions had been commercial rather than threatening, seeking valuable photographs rather than planning harmful actions. The revelation provided valuable lessons for future security planning while validating the decision to implement enhanced precautions when coordinated surveillance was detected. Harrison's experience had taught him that it was always better to overreact to false alarms than to underreact to genuine threats, particularly when the consequences of error could be so severe. As the motorcade approached Prince William's residence, Harrison reflected on the evening's multiple challenges and successes. The combination of a potential journalist infiltration, interpersonal conflicts among guests, and coordinated external surveillance had tested every aspect of their security protocols and communication systems. The successful navigation of each challenge reinforced his confidence in the partnership he had developed with Prince William and the broader protection team. The secure arrival at the prince's residence marked the formal conclusion of Harrison's responsibilities for the evening, though the debriefing process and analysis of lessons learned would continue into the following day. The complex coordination required for events like the Charity Gala created opportunities for continuous improvement in procedures and protocols. Prince William's brief private conversation with Harrison before departing the vehicle included expressions of appreciation for the evening's security management and recognition of the complex challenges that had been successfully addressed. The acknowledgement was professional rather than personal, but it reflected the trust and mutual respect that made their working relationship so effective. As Harrison watched the prince's secure entry into his residence, he found himself already thinking ahead to future events and the ongoing evolution of threats and challenges that would require their continued adaptation and vigilance. The evening had ended successfully, but in the world of royal protection, each success simply set the stage for the next challenge. The morning after the charity gala found Harrison in the secure briefing room at the Royal Protection Unit headquarters, surrounded by his team members and senior officials who had gathered for the mandatory post-event analysis. The session would examine every aspect of the previous evening's security operations, from the initial threat assessment through the alternative departure procedures that had concluded the event.
Detective Chief Inspector Margaret Thornton, the unit's commanding officer, led the discussion with the methodical precision that had earned her respect throughout the Metropolitan Police Service.
Her analysis of the evening's events focused on both the successes achieved and the areas where procedures could be enhanced for future operations. The initial focus centered on the communication system that had enabled Harrison and Prince William to coordinate their response to the undercover journalist during the cocktail reception. The cufflink signal and subsequent positioning maneuvers were reviewed through security camera footage that captured the entire sequence from multiple angles, providing valuable training material for future personnel. Agent Chen's report on the journalist's activities revealed that the man had indeed been attempting to record private conversations, though his equipment had proven insufficient to capture clear audio from the distances he had been forced to maintain. The successful disruption of his surveillance activities without creating a public incident was highlighted as a model for handling similar situations in the future. The heated discussion between charitable organization leaders during dinner provided another case study in threat assessment and response. Harrison's decision to monitor rather than immediately intervene had allowed the situation to develop naturally, while ensuring that intervention capabilities remained available if needed. Prince William's diplomatic resolution of the conflict had demonstrated the value of allowing social dynamics to play out when security concerns were manageable. However, it was the coordinated surveillance detected during departure procedures that dominated the briefing's most intensive analysis. The presence of multiple vehicles positioned to observe different exit routes had triggered appropriate security responses, even though the occupants had ultimately proven to be freelance photographers rather than hostile agents. DCI Thornton emphasized that the decision to implement alternative departure procedures had been correct based on available information at the time, and that the inconvenience and additional resources required were justified by the potential consequences of underestimating a genuine threat. The distinction between false alarms and near misses was often impossible to determine in real time, making preparedness and appropriate response the only reasonable approaches. The technical analysis of communication systems revealed several areas for potential enhancement. While the discrete signals between Harrison and Prince William had functioned effectively, the complexity of coordinating multiple simultaneous concerns had stretched the existing protocols near their limits. Recommendations included expanded signal vocabulary and improved coordination procedures for managing multiple concurrent situations. Agent Rodriguez's perimeter surveillance had proven particularly valuable in detecting the external surveillance that had influenced departure planning. The early warning provided by his observation of suspicious vehicles had created time for threat assessment and response that might not have been available if the surveillance had been detected later in the evening. The financial analysis of the evening's enhanced security measures provided important context for future planning decisions. The additional personnel, alternative transportation arrangements, and extended operational periods had significantly increased costs, but the expenses were considered justified given the potential risks and successful outcomes achieved. Media analysis conducted by the unit's public relations specialists revealed that the evening's events had been reported favorably in both traditional and social media channels. The absence of any security incidents that required public intervention had allowed coverage to focus on the charitable mission and Prince William's effective advocacy for the causes he supported. 3 weeks after the charity gala, Harrison found himself in an unusual one-on-one meeting with Prince William at Kensington Palace. These private consultations occurred periodically to discuss security procedures and address any concerns that might affect future public engagements, but the timing of this particular meeting suggested it had been motivated by the events at the Opera House. Prince William's office reflected both his military background and his charitable interests, with photographs from his service as a search and rescue pilot displayed alongside images from various philanthropic events and initiatives. The combination provided insight into the dual nature of his life, balancing the ceremonial aspects of royal duty with genuine commitment to meaningful causes. The conversation began with Prince William's expressions of appreciation for the security team's performance during the charity gala, particularly highlighting the seamless coordination that had managed multiple challenges without disrupting the event's charitable mission. His comments revealed detailed understanding of the complexities involved in balancing security requirements with public engagement obligations. However, the primary purpose of the meeting became apparent when Prince William raised questions about the communication systems that had proven so effective during the evening's various challenges. His military experience had given him appreciation for operational efficiency, and he was interested in exploring ways to enhance their existing protocols for future events. The discussion that followed provided Harrison with insights into Prince William's perspective on the unique challenges of royal life and the constant balance between accessibility and security that characterized every public appearance. The prince's comments revealed thoughtful consideration of how security measures could be optimized to enable, rather than restrict, his ability to serve the charitable causes he supported. Prince William's specific interest in expanding their silent communication vocabulary led to a detailed discussion of the various scenarios they might encounter and the types of signals that would provide optimal flexibility in different situations. His suggestions demonstrated tactical thinking, informed by both military training and extensive experience with the practical realities of public engagements. The meeting concluded with agreement to conduct additional training exercises designed to test and refine their communication systems under various simulated conditions. Prince William's willingness to invest time in these preparations reflected his commitment to the partnership that had proven so effective during the charity gala. 6 months later, the lessons learned from the Opera House event were implemented during a much larger and more complex royal engagement, the annual Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey. The enhanced communication protocols developed following the charity gala were tested under conditions involving thousands of attendees, extensive media coverage, and complex ceremonial requirements. Harrison found himself positioned in Westminster Abbey with a clear view of Prince William during the religious service, their expanded communication system providing unprecedented coordination capabilities. When a protester attempted to disrupt the ceremony by shouting from the congregation, their response was immediate and perfectly synchronized. Prince William's discreet signal alerted Harrison to the disturbance before it had escalated to a level that might have required dramatic intervention. The subsequent coordination between security personnel, Abbey officials, and ceremonial participants resulted in the quiet removal of the protester with minimal disruption to the religious observance. The success of their response during the Commonwealth Day service validated the investments made in training and system development following the charity gala. More importantly, it demonstrated how the partnership between Harrison and Prince William had evolved into something that transcended traditional security protocols to become a collaborative relationship built on mutual trust and shared commitment to public service. The Westminster Abbey incident became a new case study for royal protection training, illustrating how effective communication between protector and protected could prevent minor disruptions from escalating into major incidents. The techniques developed through their partnership began to be adopted throughout the Royal Protection Unit, influencing how security personnel worked with all members of the royal family. 1 year after the charity gala at the Royal Opera House, Harrison received notification of his promotion to Chief Inspector within the Royal Protection Unit, a recognition of both his individual performance and his contributions to the development of enhanced security protocols. The promotion carried responsibility for training new personnel and overseeing protection operations for senior members of the royal family. During the promotion ceremony, Prince William made an unexpected appearance to personally congratulate Harrison and acknowledge the partnership they had developed. The prince's comments emphasized how effective security enabled, rather than restricted, royal engagement with charitable causes and public service, allowing important work to continue despite the various risks and challenges involved. The relationship that had begun with professional duty had evolved into something approaching friendship, built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and common commitment to service. While the formal protocols of royal protection remained unchanged, the trust and understanding between them had created capabilities that exceeded what either could have achieved independently. As Harrison accepted his new responsibilities, he reflected on the journey that had begun with learning to read Prince William's subtle signals and had evolved into a partnership that influenced security practices throughout the royal protection system. The silent warning that had crossed the Opera House that March evening had initiated a process of continuous improvement that benefited not just their specific working relationship, but the entire framework of royal security. The charity gala had raised over £2 million for the Prince's Trust, enabling expanded programs that would provide opportunities for thousands of disadvantaged young people. The successful security operation had been invisible to most attendees, allowing the charitable mission to take center stage and achieve its intended impact. In the end, the true measure of their success was not the threats they had prevented or the disruptions they had managed, but the positive work they had enabled through their vigilance and professionalism. The silent communication that had begun as a tactical necessity had become the foundation for a partnership that exemplified the highest ideals of both royal service and personal dedication to protecting those who serve others. The lessons learned from that single evening continued to influence security operations years later, a testament to the power of continuous improvement and the importance of the human relationships that make complex organizations function effectively. Harrison's career had been defined by many successful operations, but the silent warning across the Opera House remained the example he used most frequently when training new personnel in the art and science of royal protection. The story of that March evening had become legend within the Royal Protection Unit, not because of its dramatic elements, but because of how it illustrated the potential for excellence when duty, training, and human understanding combined to create something greater than the sum of its parts. It was a reminder that in the world of royal protection, the most important communications often occurred in silence, and the greatest successes were measured not by what happened, but by what was prevented from happening, through vigilance, skill, and partnership.